Hello, thanks for watching part 1 of the Watch Part Pen tutorial series. In this episode I'm going to talk about pen kit selection, how to prep the tube, what can cover the tube, and the reason for that. If you've decided to make a watch parts pen, you need to make the most important decision first, which kind of kit you're going to use. The reason this is so important is watch part pens take up a lot of space on the tube, so you need to pick a kit that has plenty of room. What I mean by that, when you put your tube on the bushings, you'll see the space between the tube and the bushing. I like to call it the shoulder. You can call it whatever you want. But that shoulder is what you have to work with in casting. Now, unless you plan to bubble out that cast when you turn it and make it really obtruse and oblong, you really have limited space. Some kits can't be used for a watch part pen that I've found, because you'll end up cutting through the gears trying to get it nice and smooth. It all depends on the style you like though. Looking at this pen, it is a little bit bulbous and bubbled out. However, it works. It's a big pen, so it actually looks okay in my opinion that it comes out a little bit. Knowing that, I was able to pick different parts to put in different places that I might not put on a different kit. One of the best kits is the small arrow kit. It's a one-piece body and it gives you a lot of room around the bushings where the tube actually meets the components, so you can work with a lot of different parts on the tube. These are just a few reasons why this is so important. So aside from the actual shape and design, I pick a pen kit for the platings as well. I want to make sure that whatever my platings are, they're going to go with the selection of gears and other components I've used. If you had a lot of brass and you went with something that just totally contrasted it and wasn't appealing, you might not want to do that. So I kind of look at what I'm planning on using, especially for a face, the background, and the plating kit, and that's how I make my decision on which pen kit to use. So now I'm going to move into what we need to do to prep the tube, and I'm going to zoom in here on the counter to kind of show you a little bit about what I'm talking about. So once you've picked your kit and you decide which plating you're going to go with, the next thing you need to do is prep the tube. There's a few more considerations to make at this stage based on size and background you're going to use on the tube. I found a variety of different things can be used for the background on the tube, from straight painting to using a vinyl wrap. This happens to be a purple carbon fiber vinyl wrap, to a variety of different sleeves, including of course carbon fiber, which has turned out to be one of my favorite. You can use a nylon sleeve, a fiberglass sleeve, or this is a Kevlar carbon blended sleeve. And they all work. It's just what look do you want and how do you want it to lay down and go through that process. The disadvantage to a flat wrap is you're going to have a seam, whereas a tube or a sleeve, you don't have that seam, so you don't have to worry about trying to hide it or cover it or anything like that. So the sleeve is the way to go in my opinion, and they all look fairly nice. Carbon fiber is my favorite. So in preparation for the carbon fiber, I'm going to just do a couple of quick simple things. First, I'm going to give the tube a light sand. I just want to rough up the surface on it and help that paint stick. Now, normally I would paint this, depending on the color of the carbon fiber or the Kevlar tube, to go under it. In this case, I'm going to just go ahead and show you how I would do that without painting it. One thing to keep in mind if you've never used this carbon fiber before is don't cut it the first time or the first couple of times, because you tend to cut it short. What might look to be enough, once you expand or contract it, it never seems to be. I always end up cutting it short. So what I've done, this is just a sample. I wanted to show you how this works. I like to just get the opening there, and then you can insert it, and you can see how much it flares out on the end. So that's part of the control when you're flattening this down, because you want a nice tight pattern. You don't want it to come unraveled. It just doesn't look right. So by leaving one end on the spool, you can actually kind of control that a little better, and that's what I've started to do. So what I would do is I'd take my spool I get my one end started. And you of course want to make sure when you put this in that there's no stragglers that can catch inside of your tube, because that'll pull the weave apart and it just won't look right. So as I'm starting here, I'm going to take a couple of looks, make sure I'm not catching any. And then when I put this in, I can actually push it in and pull it a little further past the tube. Now again, this is how I do it. There may be a better way, there may be a right way, but I'm just showing you guys what I do. And so far it's worked pretty good. So now that I've got this, you can see I've still got the tube end, or the spool end connected here, and then I've got my straggler end. I want to get it past the end of the tube far enough that the pattern continues, and I can kind of just scrunch this up with my finger to make sure the pattern's laying flat, and then as I rotate it I can see that there's no gaps or spaces. At this point I may even put a little twist tie or a light string. I'm not going to tie it tight, just to hold this down like this, as you can see, so when I glue it, it's a little more firm. So once I've got this and I've either wrapped this or I'm holding it, by leaving this on the longer part of the roll here, I can glue this on a little easier. And how I'm going to do that is I would just take thin CA and just kind of twist this and just pour it over there, and I want to keep it holding down so that the glue runs down and then into these frays. And essentially I'm going to glue half of this on at a time. So I'll spin it as I dump or pour the CA on, and I like to wear a rubber glove, that way I can kind of keep this tight and tucked if I haven't wrapped it, and then I can use the rest of this to hang it on something. So I might hang it on a spool or a hook or something. And this just allows the carbon fiber to hang a little flatter, and I've found that for me this is the best way to get the nice pattern and the consistency in the carbon fiber. So once this has dried and I'm satisfied with the way the glue has cured, I'm going to go ahead and then cut this upper end. Now, like I said before, you can put a little clamp or a twist tie. You don't want it too tight because that'll actually change the way it looks, but you can do something if you'd like. You don't need to. But then I'll clip this end and just flip it over, do the same thing, make sure the pattern is nice and flat, and I'll pour the thin CA glue around the tube this way and then let that dry. Once I do this, I let these dry for several days. I typically will do a couple at a time, that way I always have something to work on, but I don't want to rush this. Every step of this watch part pen process I let dry for a long time. I'm not afraid to let something sit a few days or a week and then work on something else and go back to it. I just think that the CA has to gas off and the resins have to cure, so giving it time at every step is not a bad thing. So once the carbon fiber has dried, you're going to have that fray at the end, and it's going to be really crusty and kind of crunchy, not real easy to cut. What I've found that I use to cut the CA coated carbon fiber are these. And what these are, they're RC car Lexan body scissors. And if you can see, I don't know if it'll pick it up, there's a little bit of a curve to it at this end here. It curves right, I guess. And the reason I like these, for two reasons really. They're a nice tight cut. I've been using these for 2 years now and they're still sharp. And the way the blade curves, it makes it real tight. If it was a sloppy pair of scissors, you would have a problem because that carbon fiber would want to get between and it wouldn't cut. And the beauty of these, because they're meant to cut corners with the curve, is you can cut in on your fray, and as you rotate it, you can cut down to the tube, working your way to the tube, and always be cutting away from the tube even though you're cutting right next to the tube. And what that'll do, and I learned the hard way, is if you have flat scissors, you tend to cut too far or even cut at an angle over your carbon fiber, and then you expose some of the tube and it just doesn't look right. So these curved scissors have been a key in getting my carbon fiber just right at the end of the tube. Now, if you're not going with carbon fiber, if you're going with one of the Kevlar composites or even a different medium altogether, such as this copper aluminum tape that is popular right now. A lot of people are putting watch gears on these. The same kind of things apply. Once you get it set, if you're coating it in CA or using CA to glue it, definitely let it dry. Now, it's not as important here because you are still going to be gluing on the watch parts, so you'll have to let it cure at that stage also. The main thing you're after is making sure that these ends, the frayed ends, are stiff enough and firm enough that you can trim them effectively and have a nice straight edge. So thanks for watching the first episode in the Watch Part Pen series. I know it's not a very exciting topic or fun, but this is crucial. From picking the right pen kit so that you don't do all this and have it wasted at the end, to getting the background right. And in the next video, we'll get to some fun stuff. Thanks for watching. Okay, I'm back in the shop. This is episode 2 of the Watch Part Pen series. I wanted to devote this episode to the watch face. Very important part of the watch part pen because it's kind of the centerpiece of the whole thing. Everything else is details around the face. Not only selection, but how we bend the face for the pen. And there's a bunch of different ways you can do that. I'm going to show you how I do it and a couple little details that might help you. And then, the fun part is picking out what you want to use for it. You can get an old one, a new one, a character one, or something that has sentimental value in your family. I get a lot of requests for that. People will send me an old watch that doesn't work that maybe was theirs as a child or their mother's or whatever. And it makes a really nice gift or something that they can keep just in the family. So some of the key tools that you're going to need to bend watch faces are a punch set. I use the Harbor Freight punch set. I've showed it before in other videos. It works really well because there's so many different sizes and you can pick the right size for what you need. I use a lot this jeweler's Dapping block. It works well. It's what I would actually prefer, and I'm looking for one right now, is something with deeper cavities. And the reason being is these wider cavities are so shallow that it actually doesn't give me enough curvature on some of the parts. So I have to either go to a smaller size or bend it by hand or something like that. Whereas a deeper cavity would work a little better. Before I had this block, however, I would actually just make my own out of wood, something fairly hard and common that I had laying around. I always have a lot of cocobolo for some reason, so I've done a lot with the cocobolo, and it's kind of the same as the metal dapping block, but it just gives you the option. You can basically cut one of these for any size you need as long as you have the drill bit and a saw to cut it down the lengthwise. So those are the tools mainly used. If you have access to an arbor press, it'll certainly make certain ones easier because you don't have to push and pull. You can just use the press. But those are what you need to start with. And I even started using this just an aluminum rod, and you can bend parts around that. So that even works well. So first I want to talk about the watch face. Now, depending on the size of the pen or what model pen you're making, you can pick from a lot of different faces. You can go with something this small on up to a pocket watch that could be as big as this. And obviously those are going to be handled a little differently. But the biggest factor in choosing the face is the material. A lot of the vintage faces have certain kinds of paints that can crack when you bend them, or even be made of porcelain. And I have this old porcelain pocket watch face here. It's the Raven, and I'm only doing this because it's already pretty much ruined and destroyed. But if you try to bend this, I'll show you what happens. It just cracks, and you can see it just flakes off of there. So obviously this isn't going to make a good face for a pen because you can't bend it and shape it. The porcelain just cracks. One way you can tell, a lot of the porcelain looks like this on the back. It has the green. I don't know if that's some kind of enamel or what, but I've noticed that's what the porcelains look like on the back. So I don't even try to bend them anymore if I see that. I use them for something else because they are really cool and I hate to destroy them. So aside from the paint, whether it be plastic, another type is a lot of pocket watches and old watches have a paper front. And what it is it's paper laid over the metal, and it's just essentially glued on. You can do it a couple of different ways. You can bend the metal and leave it intact, seal the paper up so it casts well, or you can actually use a razor blade and separate the paper from the metal. And really there's no advantage to doing one or the other that I've noticed. I actually have done both ways and they both work just fine. So it's kind of whatever your preference is. If it's already coming off, you might want to just separate it. If it's intact nicely, I would just bend it, seal it, and go from there. Now when you're looking at these faces, like I said before, it's all materials. Certain ones will be a real thin metal or a thin material, whatever it may be, and you could actually just take a punch or whatever you're bending around and perfectly shape them just with your thumb. You can see just real quickly, I get a perfect curve on that because it's so thin and light. Now, they're not all going to be that way, and I wish they were. Most of them will be more like this one. This is an old Mickey Mouse watch. And if I try to take this and bend it, it's actually so rigid I can hardly even bend it. But I certainly can't get a nice bend on it. So that's where the dapping block comes in handy for that. Now I'll go back to that in just a sec. But the other thing you're going to run into, especially with some of the older watches, is they have a lot of wrapped and bent metal on the edges. And I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but they have a lot of edges. Now you can do a couple of different things. You can either flatten that out, just hammer it out, tap it out, or you can actually take these scissors, back to the same scissors I use for trimming my carbon fiber, and you can actually just cut right along here. And again, it's the curved blade scissors, so it always cuts out, so I don't have to worry about cutting in and over cutting, but I can actually follow this line, and I know you won't be able to see this, so you'll have to take my word for it. But I can actually make a perfect cut with the direction of the face with these scissors. And the metal's thin enough, it hasn't seemed to hurt the scissors. I've done it hundreds of times and they're still sharp. So it seems to work really well, but that's a nice way to use an old face like this. And I'll go ahead and bend this one. So I'm gonna go ahead and trim all these edges off. And there again, it's perfect little cut. And the beauty, I guess, is if you don't make a perfect cut, it's a vintage part and it's very unique anyways. So now I've got a nice flat face. I might take this, and I would have a hammer normally, but tap out those edges. Just make sure I don't have any burrs or anything. Like that. And now you can see I can set this in the cavity and press it down, and that's how I get my bend. When I'm using this, I'm going to do a couple of different things. I'm going to first probably start, depending on which pen I'm making and what size I need, I'm going to start with this being a little bigger, and I'll put the punch or whatever I'm using, and I'm going to try to do this so you can see. Let's see here. Get there. I may even go a size too large to initially bend it, just so I get that first thing. And you can see that doesn't take much pressure, so this face is actually pretty soft. And with just that one press, I've got a pretty good curve going. If I realized it was that soft, I might actually just shape it with my fingers. And then I can always shape it to the tube specifically and give it that better bend. Now, if this wasn't enough of a curve because of the size of the punch or the size of the cavity, I can actually go to the next size smaller and place my already curved part in there and give that a little press. And that'll actually give it that little smaller curve, and you can progressively step down. I've found that if you do the whole curve at once on a very small size, you risk damaging the face, cracking the paint, or even scratching it. Now, if scratching is a problem, I have put paper and felt in here to prevent that from happening, but that'll just give you a little more protection. That is pretty much how I bend the faces. The other parts, such as the gears, would be done exactly the same way. Now there are some tricks and tips for that I'll show you in the next video, and we will progress, and we're almost there. You can see that little guy is curved. So a lot of options here, no one right way or wrong way to do it. You can use a lot of different tools, and you just got to figure out what works for what you're making. Thanks for watching. Be sure and post any comments or questions below, and I will see you next time.